Welcome back, listeners, to Learning from Friends. My name is Cade Curtis, your tour guide in this lovely adventure that we get to do bi-weekly together. You are coming in on part 2 of a 3-part episode that I speak with Amy about her being a middle school counselor. So if you have not listened to episode 1, please go back and do that now. If you are here for part 2, you're in the right place, and I'm looking forward to having you here to join us. Now, before we do that, though, we got to have my mom's quote of the day. So, Mom, take it away.
Today's quote is by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Write it on your heart that every day is the best day in the year. He is rich who owns the day, and no one owns the day who allows it to be invaded with fret and anxiety. Finish every day and be done with it. You have done what you could. Some blunders and absurdities no doubt crept in. Forget them as soon as you can. Tomorrow is a new day. Begin it well and serenely, with too high a spirit to be cumbered with your own nonsense. This new day is too dear, with its hopes and invitations, to waste a moment on the yesterdays.
Thank you, Mom, as always, for putting us off on the right foot to start into this conversations of the episode that I'm speaking with Amy about being a middle school counselor. So let's pick back up here in the conversation and continue to learn and grow from learning from friends. You do a lot in a day, and can you just give us walk through a little bit of what a day looks like for your role?
Well, every day is different, especially in middle school. And that's one reason why I love being middle school counselors, because there are no 2 days that are the same. Like we talked about, middle school is such a unique place. There's 600 kids. All of them at some point between grades 6 through 8, they're experiencing puberty, hormones.
Oh, yeah.
Friendship issues, cell phones, social media, friendship, dating, relationship, gossip, lunchroom. And some days a student can have all of those things happening all at the same time. And that's a really hard day. And I spend a lot of time with that one student that day. But then they come back to school the next day and it's like a quiet day. And it's like, wow, what happened yesterday? That was crazy. But then they get a good night's sleep. And now they're like, okay.
It starts the whole new world.
Yeah. It's a whole new world.
Every day's a new day.
It's a new day. And some days, we can't even count on the bell schedule being the same. And
that's true.
That sounds kind of crazy, but when you work in a school, anything can happen, right? And we've gotten further away from this since COVID, but every once in a while, still, there'll be a shortage in the transportation department, too many bus drivers.
Oh, yeah.
Especially cold and flu season. They don't have subs to drive the buses. So our school may end up on an early release or a delayed start to help with busing, just to be able to get the kids to school. So we can't always guarantee that even the bell schedule will be the same. Now, 99% of the time it is the same, but that can still happen. Or, we have an event going on. We've got a pep rally. We have an assembly. We have a field trip. Sometimes, the bell schedule gets adjusted. And so literally there's no 2 days that are the same. And I'll never forget this. One day we were on I think we were on a 30-minute early release that day to help with busing. And there was also I don't know what else was going on that day, but during that day too, there was a natural gas smell coming from one of the classrooms.
Oh, gosh.
We had to evacuate the building. So, in the staff chat, the one teacher says in there, she says, do we have a bell schedule for a 30-minute early release with a gas leak? And it was just it's no, it's just funny. No 2 days are the same. And so
yeah, that's the best part about the job.
Yeah. But I will say, the majority of my days are spent working with students, either individually in a small group, doing classroom lessons. My door's open most of the time. If it's not open, I'm having a confidential conversation, either with a student, I'm on the phone with a parent, I've got a teacher in my office, those kinds of things. But for the most part, I want my day to be spent with students. And so a lot of times I'll be in the lunchroom during lunch, just being an extra person. It's not an assigned duty for us, thankfully, because a lot of things do happen during lunch. And, I might have to pull a kid in my office during lunch because of something that's going on. But the lunchroom provides a different space for you to be able to see kids. And so I'm in there a lot. in the hallways. I try to be in the hallways a lot. Sometimes I get stuck in my office. I can't make it out during every class change, but I try to keep my office open. And so we also have a sign-in system for kids to be able to see us, because kids do want to see us. And when
Oh, yeah.
I'm walking down the hallway and Sally comes up and says, "Hey, Mrs. Weinrich, can I talk to you later today?" And then Joey comes up and says, "Hey, Miss Weinrich, can I see you later today?" And hey, Avea comes up and Avea's like, "Hey, I need some help with my locker." And a teacher says, "Hey, that meeting we have after school, can we talk about that meeting before the meeting?" And I'm like, "Okay."
Woo!
That's like a lot of things to remember.
There's a
So
lot.
I'll tell the kids, I'll say, "Hey, Sally, go ahead and go to the office and sign in to see me." And so we have a computer in the office, it's a kiosk. And so the student will sign in, that, they'll select their grade level. So we know, whose caseload they're on. And just they'll put in their name, and they'll say just the overarching reason why they need to see me. Okay. Is it about their schedule? Is it about a friend? Is it worried about an assignment? Like, they could put in why they need to see me. And so then that student could go back to class, and then I'll pull that student out of study hall, or, out of gym's super important, but I can pull a kid out of gym a little easier than math. So then I can look at their schedule and see when to pull them. But as those kids are coming up to me in the hallway, I can't, like, it's physically
Can't drop
impossible for
everything.
me to
Yeah.
remember every single thing, right? Or a teacher will say, "Hey, can we chat about that?" I'll say, "Hey, can you send me a quick email just as a reminder?" Or I'll even email myself, from my phone, "Hey, talk to Mrs. So and so before the meeting." And so, all of that is a lot to juggle. And so when I have kids sign in, you know, I could go into work and I'll say, "Okay, today I'm going to meet with all of the students that signed in yesterday." But then I walk into my office and I get the day
Uh,
going. And in our contract, we've got about 30 minutes before kids arrive. And so if I don't have a meeting during those 30 minutes, I'll check emails or voicemails and do some of those things. And then the kids come in, and I have a kid walk into my office with a crisis. So my whole plan of seeing everybody who signed in yesterday is now working with this one student who really needs me right now in this crisis. And so no 2 days are the same. I can have a to-do list, and that's great, but it's a great day if I get one thing crossed off. It's an even better day if I get two. So it's
Take
like
the little victories. Those are the
a
big
little
ones.
victory, and so sometimes my to-do list for Monday moves to Tuesday, moves to Wednesday. And sometimes, unfortunately, because of the nature of our job, if a student signs in on Monday because they want to talk about changing their schedule, if a crisis happens or something happens, I might unfortunately not get to that kid until Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah.
Whereas I want to, and I try to, and I aim to try to,
You can't be everywhere at once.
I try to get them within 24 hours, but that doesn't always happen. But that all goes back to ratios, right? So if I had less kids, would I have more time? Maybe, probably. And it goes back to other duties as assigned, because we're in all these other meetings and doing these other things
Yeah. You can't be everywhere.
instead of meeting with kids. So these are all big challenges that are, some of them are systemic, right? That we're not going to be able to change today, that have to go through a process to change. But and it's hard because in our role we don't always have control over our day, because you never know what's going to pop up, because
You never can. You never can.
you literally never can't. And especially when you're working with people and humans and teenagers, like, you literally cannot plan your day and expect your day to go like you plan it, because it's not going to. And we can get frustrated in that space, and you can live in a world of frustration because you can never get done what you're trying to get done.
That is true.
Or you can say, "This is my job, and my days are never going to be the same, and that's okay. And if I don't type up this roster today, I'll get to that roster tomorrow, because today I need to meet with so and so." And you
Yeah.
have to be okay in this job leaving your work at work, which is really hard. But
That is extremely hard.
you have to be able to stop at some point, because in our job, you could go all night. You really could.
True.
You
True.
can come home and you can work on emails. You can work on clerical stuff. You can work on all these things all night long, but you have to put some professional boundaries in place, and you have to
Yeah.
be able to say, when I get home at 4:30, I'm mom. I'm not Mrs. Weinrich. I'm going to be mom until 7:30 the next morning. And at work I'm still mom, but at work I can be Mrs. Weinrich. But when I'm at home,
Yep.
I need to only be mom. I need to only be mom. And so, and wife for that matter, because that's also very essential to be wife and mom at home, along with just Mrs. Weinrich at school. But some seasons of the school year are harder than others to have those
Oh my
boundaries.
gosh, they are. It's testing season.
Testing season and the start of the year, right? So we go
Yes.
in and we're going to start back in a few weeks, and I know this will be in October, so we've started back a couple months ago. But when we start in August, right, in my district, we have sixth grade only day. So we only have sixth graders on that first day, but the school counselors were running that day from the moment kids walk in until lunch. And then after that, they're with their teachers, but we're running that day. And that prep, a lot of that prep, I need to be prepping at home for some of that because it's a lot to prep, right? And during that prep work, what's not happening during that time are schedule changes. So then
Yes.
I'm also having to do schedule changes. So August is a time where my boundaries are a little bit looser, right? I will do work from home during that time, but I wait till the kids are in bed, and I can take my mom hat off for an hour and do some schedule changes for an hour, because if I don't, then the next day is going to be really hard and we get overwhelmed and we get into these cycles, right? So the important thing for school counselors and any school counselor that's listening to this is you have to have boundaries, and you have to have professional boundaries. And if you're
Yes.
going to do work at home, and sometimes we feel like that's necessary, or sometimes instead of working from home, we might stay in the office an hour later, is to put a boundary on that. I'm going to set a timer for 1 hour, and I'm going to work on schedules for 1 hour. And when my timer goes off, I'm stopping for the night. I'm stopping. And the rest can wait until tomorrow. Because if you don't, you're going to go all night and
And
you
then wake up the next morning and have no energy.
and have nothing. And so you can't pour from an empty cup. And I know that's, people say that, but it's so real, because you
Oh
have to
yeah.
fill
Oh
your own
yeah.
cup, and you have to be able to be a good wife and be a good husband and be a good mom at the same time that you're being a good school counselor. And to be able to be all of those things, you have to have boundaries. And it's okay to vocalize your boundaries, and
Yes.
it's okay to tell your principal, I'm not going to answer my phone at 5 o'clock in the evening unless there's a crisis. It's okay to tell your principal that. It's okay to not respond to a parent in the evening. It's okay to not wake up at 4 a.m. and work. It's okay to have those boundaries. And not only is it okay, it's essential. And we're in the mental health field, and we're helping kids, and we're in education, and it's very demanding, and it's really hard to leave work at work, and it's really hard to
Yeah, it is.
stop. But
Yeah, it is.
if you don't
Because we
stop,
care. Yeah.
we care, and that's what makes it hard. But if you don't stop, then you're gonna burn out, and
Yep.
you're
Fast. And that's why I have a huge burnout rate at times.
yes, there's a huge burnout rate, and people are taking sick days, and they should be taking sick days. And if you're sick, you should be at home. But
Yes.
people don't take sick days because they feel like they can't say I'm sick. Like they go to work and they're sick and they're working, but when you're going to work and you're sick, you're not healing and you're not getting better. You're
Nope. You're getting
prolonging it.
worse. Yep.
And
Exactly.
you might be, I've had, and especially if you're a parent, your kid could get sick and it's spontaneous and you don't know about it, right? But I've had a night where I'm like, gosh, I'm like getting this. I have got to get better. Like I have a head cold and I cannot function. I know I'm not gonna be able to function well at work tomorrow, but I have this meeting at 7:30 in the morning. So,
I'm gonna tough
I'll
it out.
tough it out. But I've gotten
Ugh.
better. And as I go into year 10, I'm getting better and better with saying like texting my admin and being like, hey, I gotta be out tomorrow. Can you have, the secretary call and reschedule that meeting? Or can you run that meeting without me? Or do you want me to hop on from home, but then I'm done for the day? Like, I got to be able
How
to
can we make this
say,
work? Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I gotta be able to say, like, even if I have a meeting, I can't run a meeting if I'm at home puking. Like, hello. So
True. True.
you got to be able to say, like, I'm going to be sick today. I'm going to be home sick today. But when we go and we go and we go, it wears down our body and we actually get sick more. And so then
Yeah, we do.
the end result is then you're taking more days off than you would have if you had just taken the day when you really first needed it. And yeah, it's just really important that we are putting those
Cognizant
boundaries
and
in
aware of
place.
ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah,
Listen to
and
our bodies, man. Listen to your body.
yes, and we preach that to kids, right? We preach it to kids. We say set a timer, only work for this amount of time. But when you preach it but don't practice it, kids could pick up on that. And
Very quickly.
they do pick up on that. And when you go into school and you say, I was up until 11 o'clock grading your papers last night, and blah, and you're in a bad mood, then you're not the best teacher that day, right? So what purpose did it
Exactly.
serve to stay up until 11 when you grading papers, when you could just tell your students like, hey, I'll get your papers back to you tomorrow, and they'll be like, oh, okay, thanks for letting us know they're coming tomorrow, instead of like burning yourself out so bad.
And I'm very, very notoriously over the years done this. We all do it. We all fall into those traps.
Yeah,
We all do.
absolutely. Especially, at the end of the grading period or
Oh my word, yes.
during schedules and that kind of stuff. But the one other thing about, and I'll say about working late, is you got to know, and teachers need to know this too. Anybody that works with kids needs to know. You need to know your after hours protocol, because if you're online and
Oh
you're working
yes.
on emails and you see something and you open an email, you are liable because you've opened and you're aware of that situation. So I'll just give one example. I was up, I forget what time of year it was, but I was up late. It was like 9 o'clock at night and I'm working on emails, and a student messages me, and it wasn't it, or emails me, I'm in an unsafe situation at home right now. And they're like, I don't have my phone. My parents took my phone, but I don't feel safe. And this student is actively emailing me while I'm on doing emails or schedule changes during that time at 9 o'clock at night.
Oh wow.
My legal obligation is to call the police. So
Yeah.
I called the police to go check on that family because that student is telling me in an email, I'm not safe right now. And since I'm
Yeah.
on and I'm reading that, I'm liable.
Mandated reporter.
I'm a mandated reporter and I'm liable now for that child's safety because I'm reading that email. Or, if you're online, and even if you're checking your emails and it's 8 o'clock at night, the kids are in bed and you're thinking I'm gonna get some emails done tonight, and a student had emailed you at 5 o'clock that evening while they're working on their homework. Parents think they're working on their homework, but they email you and they say, Mrs. Weinrich, I'm having thoughts about dying. Even though it was 3 4 hours ago, I'm still liable to call the police and have a well visit
Check in on
on
that.
that
Yeah.
kid. And so and in my district, we've been told like the district's not gonna be mad at you for sending a well visit on a child after hours if you're getting some concerning information, and that the district will support us in that. And I hope that that's true for all districts because it's all there's no ill intent, right? It's always out of the protection of the student. But this is one reason why you have to be very careful about working in the evening, because you can get yourself into these situations
Yeah, you
um,
can very quickly.
very quickly where you're communicating with a student after hours, and you are, liable and calling the police late at night. And if that happens, right, and I think there's not enough information out and people don't always know what to do with that information, right? So, like, let's say a teacher's at home working in the evening and they get that message from a student. If they don't know their after hours protocol, if they don't know what they're supposed to be doing with that information, what sometimes happens is the teacher knows, okay, I have to tell somebody. So they try to call the school counselor. Well, maybe the school counselor is at their kid's sporting event and their phone's turned off. Or maybe that school counselor went to bed already. Or that school counselor is out to dinner and their phone's at home and you can't get a hold of the school counselor. Okay. Then you're calling your principal. Well, maybe your principal is out to dinner, or maybe your principal is at another obligation, and now you've exhausted that. And during that time, something bad
Oh my
can
gosh,
happen.
yes. Oh,
So,
yeah.
teachers and counselors and custodians and secretaries and food service, everybody needs to know what are the after hours protocol and what do I need to do if I see that. And in different districts that can mean different things, and so that's why it's so important that you know what that policy is in the school that you're in and what to do with that information. And also, like, it's just good for humans to know what to do with that information, because if my
True. True.
if my neighbor across the street, they've got teenagers, if they come over and that teenager knocks on my door and that teenager says, like, hey, I don't know you really well, but, like, my brother's telling me this stuff and it's really scary and my mom's not home. I need to know what to do with that. Right. And so
True.
nobody's ever going to be mad at anybody for sending a well visit to a family and to check on people. And, if somebody's mad about that, then there's something else going on there with that person. But really, we need to always have the best interest of other people in mind. And even, like, just educating those people around you that might not know. I mean, my husband, he used to work in a call center, and somebody told him that one day, and he was like, he texted me, he's like, somebody just told me this, I don't know what to do with this information. And I'm like, you
Oh,
gotta call
man.
the police. And he's like,
Yeah.
oh, like, I didn't know, like, and it's not out of ill intent, it's just like people just don't know. And now,
True.
like,
True.
he knows. So, like, if anybody ever tells him something, like, he knows what to do. And I think people are just scared of that information, and people are scared to talk about dying or suicide or mental health. And that stigma needs to break, and people need to know that it's okay to get help for yourself and it's okay to get help for other people. And if you don't know
Yes.
what to do with that, call somebody who does and they'll help you get through it, because nobody wants anything bad to happen to anybody. And um,
No, it's true.
and it's just, I got kind of on this tangent about talking about professional boundaries, but just knowing and educating yourself about what to do, but also being really intentional about your time, about what you're doing at home. And, even if you're a school counselor or a teacher and you're single and you live by yourself and it's you and your dog, that's great. But you still need to have boundaries, and you still need to, even if you don't have, a kid saying, mommy, 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 or, a spouse saying, hey, I want to spend time with you. And those are all, so important. Even if you're just alone by yourself and you and your dog or you and your cat or a fish or whatever, you still need to have boundaries. You still need to say, like,
Yes, you do.
at 8 o'clock at night, I'm going to watch Netflix. Like,
Yeah.
you need to be able to say, like, I'm going to go, I'm going to call a friend. Or, we don't call people anymore because that's not cool. And millennials, we don't want our phone to ring, right? But, like, text a friend and say, hey, like, do you want to, go get ice cream, or, like, do you want to go get chips and queso? Like, I just need some people, and it's okay.
Need to leave the house.
You
Yeah.
need to leave, or you need to to be at home reading a book or watching Netflix, or maybe you just need
You time,
to
just you time.
sit in silence. Like, maybe you just need to do that. And that's
Yeah.
okay. And you're allowed to close your computer and you're allowed to turn off your phone. And it doesn't matter if you have a family at home or you don't have a family at home. People are people, and you need to be able to take a break, and you need to be able to just unplug, and you need to literally turn off your phone sometimes. And I'm so bad about that. So bad about
We all are.
that. So,
We all are.
but you
It's
know,
not a one person.
people, they'll put their work email on their phone, and I've been guilty of that at times. And
I refuse to. I literally
that's
took it off. I did it once and I took it off and I was like,
that's
oh
good,
no,
Cade.
not again.
I need to learn from you because, and even, I went through a period of time where I would just turn on my work email on my phone when I was at work. And it's like, why? Why do I need to be on my email at work on my phone during a meeting? Like, that's silly. Like, what am I doing? Like, why do I need to do that?
Focus on one thing at a time. That's the hardest
Right.
thing is we want to multitask so much.
Yeah,
We do. And then but we miss out.
we
We
do.
miss out on what's happening there. Be here now. I think it was one of the big phrases that I love to use every so often. Just like, hey, be here now. Don't worry
Right.
about what's over here. What's over to be at this exact moment.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, gosh, just turn it off. Just turn it off.
Yeah.
And like,
And that's hard.
it's really hard. And I guess I'll kind of go down the cell phone rabbit hole here for a minute, but
Let's go that route because that is a huge cell phones. Ooh,
cell
man.
phones are horrible. And you know what? My son, he's going into first grade, but he said, Mommy, when I get to third grade, I get a phone. I'm like, third grade? What do you mean
Whoa.
third grade? He's like, yeah, the third
Wow.
graders on the bus, they all have cell phones. And I'm like, third grade? No way. You're not getting one until you're 18.
Yeah,
I'm just
as it
kidding,
should
but
be.
like, but cell phones are so problematic.
Gosh, it creates
And
so much anxiety just thinking about it gives me anxiety of the cell phone.
the cell
Well,
phones, and I heard this once, and it was so like, I was like, wow, that's really insightful. And it's because when you give a kid a smartphone, or you give an adult a smartphone, they have access to everything, right? They have
yeah, they do.
access to the internet. Kids are seeing things now that people didn't used to see until they were adults. They know what's going on when they shouldn't know what's going on. It's adult content, whatever that can mean, so many things. But somebody said in I think I was in some type of a convocation, and the speaker said, cell phones and the internet are like the playground, and no one's on recess duty.
Oh,
And it's like, wow, you're right. Like, you just give this kid a cell phone, or you put him
yep,
on the playground, and nobody's
yep.
watching him. Nobody knows. The adults are not monitoring what is going on their kid's cell phone. And it causes so many issues. And, in schools, the research is coming out about cell phones, and it's like, it's clear, right? It's clear that students who have
Oh
access
yeah.
to phones are not learning as much as those who don't have access to phones. And it's detrimental to kids. And even just having a cell phone on your person is enough of a distraction where kids are worried about what's going on their phones.
Yep, exactly. It's almost like there's that what is it called? There's like that nervous vibration that you feel that you automatically feel like every couple of minutes you have to check it, you have to look at it, you
Yeah.
have to feel it, like the phantom vibe, I think is what it's
Yeah.
called, or
And
something like
yeah.
that. Like it's
And it's
oh,
becoming
'cause
a compulsion to like check
it
your
is.
phone. And,
Yes.
kids will be like, oh, I was just checking the time. And well, there's a clock, right? But
Right behind you. I
kids
have
don't
two
know
in
how
my
to read
class.
a
I literally
clock.
had two.
Kids are
Nope, not anymore.
They don't know how to read a clock. And it's like, okay, we're losing some of these like very basic skills, like reading an analog clock. But they are, oh, I was just checking the time. But really they're, seeing how many notifications they have. And
Yep.
part of it, and I'm gonna make a big call out here, part of this problem is the parents, because the parents are saying, well, I need to have access to my kid, I need to know what's going on with my kid. And a student will have their phone out in class, and the teacher will say, hey, Johnny, what's going on your phone? And they're like, well, my mom's texting me. Okay, mom, you know your kid's at school. Why are you
In
texting
school.
your kid at
Yep.
school? You
It's
know,
distracted, and they're worried about their grade, and their grade drops down too low. Well, in the middle of class, it creates a
it's a
whole
cycle.
argument.
It's
Yep,
a
it is.
cycle. And it's like, mom, you know your kid's at school and you're texting your kid about dinner tonight. Like your kid needs to be learning this math problem here, and you're texting the kid and now the kid's worried about dinner tonight when they shouldn't be worried about dinner, right? And it's like, okay, well, what do we do before phones? Well, if there was an emergency
Call
or
the front office.
crisis, you
Yeah.
call the office. And or kids go to the bathroom and they're hiding in the bathroom texting their parents. And in a way, you know, it's great that you're texting your mom and letting her know what's going on at school. But at the same time, if you're having strong enough feelings and emotions that you're feeling
Oh
like
yeah.
you need to hide in a bathroom, we need to get you some help, like right now. Not
Yes.
and sometimes we get a call and a mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or somebody, aunt, they'll call the office and they'll say, my kid's in the bathroom texting me that they're crying. And we're like, oh my gosh, and so we go down to the
How do we
bathroom
know?
with
Yeah.
the kid. Like we wouldn't have known, that your kid was crying in the bathroom. And I'm not saying that kids have never cried in the bathroom before, because that's
Yeah.
always been a thing. But the truth is, when a kid leaves a classroom and says they're going to the bathroom and they're gone for 20 minutes, we know something's going on there that's not just going to the bathroom. And
Yeah.
if they're in the bathroom for 20 minutes and they're going to like they need to go to the clinic, right? But like, you know, there's something else going on there, and what's going on. And another big issue we see with the phones is, and I'll say to parents too, after school activities start in middle school, you want to know your kid has a ride home. You want to know that your kid is actually going to football practice. All of that is great. But when the school day
Oh
is
yeah.
going on until 3 o'clock, your kid shouldn't be answering their phone and texting you. If you want your
Yep.
kid to use their phone at 3 o'clock and tell you that they're staying for football practice, like, by all means, that's great. But have your kid turn off their phone and leave it in their backpack or their locker during the school
Oh
day.
yeah.
They shouldn't be on that. But I think parents are feeding into the problem rather than helping solve the problem. And the other thing that's going on with cell phones is social media. And
Oh my word.
te-
Woo.
technology advances so quickly, we can't keep up with it. Like
Yep.
literally, we're always behind. Us adults are always behind the kids on the social media and the games and the chats and the forums, all these things. We're always behind, and we're always like, it's like a rat race. Like, what's going on? What's next? And first it was Facebook and or MySpace, right?
Maybe it was Zanga. Who
What
knows?
was
Maybe
that
it
guy's
was
name? Tom.
Zanga.
Tom
Yeah. Oh
from
yeah,
MySpace.
my friend Tom.
Tom
Yep.
from MySpace or my MySpace.
MySpace.
And then like, okay, so that started, when we were millennials, we were in high school, college, and Facebook. And then it's like, okay, well, here's this thing called Twitter, and then Instagram. It's like, oh, what are those? And then it's Snapchat.
It
By the time
goes
the
on and on
adults,
and on and on.
by the time the adults are getting to Twitter, the kids are on Snapchat, right? And now it's like Snapchat's old news because now we're on TikTok. And like, honestly, who knows what's happened
What's
this
the next one?
summer that we don't
Yep.
know, right? And so it happens so quick. Or we've heard about this thing, and I didn't even know what this was, but I learned of this thing that's so scary last school year called doxing people. And I was like,
I haven't heard of that. Man, I'm behind.
I know, right? So like, doxing is basically when you take a person's information and you publish it out on the internet for everybody and you make it public. um
Oh,
Confidential information, like I'm talking like confidential stuff, like social
potential.
security
Yeah.
numbers and addresses and phone like, that's really
Yeah, it
scary.
is. Yeah, it is.
And so we found out some of this information, through a situation at school where there was a plan to dox another student and put all their information out there. Scary stuff. And then,
That is extremely scary.
you start learning about the dark web, and it's like, whoa, that's creepy. So
That is extremely.
yeah, so
Yeah.
like, by the time we get to school in August, or when this airs, even in October, September, October, it's going to be like, well, what's the app
What's the new
now?
thing? Yeah.
What's
What's
the
the thing
app
now?
now? And do the adults
The
know about that yet? Because we're always behind. And that's the nature of technology and kids having their phones. But what's happening is like when adolescents adolescent brains are not fully developed, and we know
Nope.
that. That's a scientific fact. Their brain is not developed. Okay, and so when a student is in the moment and they are on FaceTime with another student, okay, I'm just gonna go boy girl here, but it could be girl girl, could be boy boy, whatever, however you want it to be. When a girl is on FaceTime without her shirt on, and you're on with an older boy who's going through puberty and is got hormones raging, what
Yep.
do you think a boy is going to do? Or what do you think your crush is going to do? They are going to screenshot that. And 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds, they don't have the capability because their brains are not fully developed yet biologically to know what the consequence of that is going to be. And so that happens, and it happens a lot, and it's permanently damaging for that girl or that boy who's had their picture taken of some in some way, that even if it is a boy who's having a bad hair day, okay, and they're on with a friend and that friend screenshots it and then they start making fun of that image, right,
Oh
and
my
sending
gosh,
it,
yes.
it
Ooh.
could be as, what might seem to us as trivial, a bad hair day, but for that
But
kid,
that's their
that's
world.
their
Yeah.
world, and that's so detrimental, right? But when things like nude shots get sent or airdropped in a cafeteria,
Sex
that
offenders. Now this is where we're going.
yeah,
Yep.
that it's true, and so not only the legal things are happening, right? And
Yep.
but the social things are happening,
Yep.
and that child's world is now damaged because of something that they did impulsively because they are in puberty as an adolescent without a fully developed brain. And it's like, ah, that could have been prevented if that kid didn't have a phone.
Entirely. Yes.
And it's like,
Exactly.
like I wish you could have known. And
Yep.
sometimes kids do know, and kids are like,
It's
yeah,
true. It's true.
it's gonna be a screenshot. But they really like this other person. They really like this girl. They really like this boy. So they're getting on like that, and they really like them. But you know what? Then a week goes by and that person doesn't like you anymore. And now
Now it's
they've shared it. You
oh.
know,
Yep, and now
you
everything's
thought
changed.
you thought this person was your best friend, and they were your best friend, but then something happened and now you're not best friends anymore. And now it's out. And it's so sad to watch those situations happen because
Oh
you're like,
my gosh,
ah,
yes.
I wish I could have convinced you not to do that. But it's just such a problem, and it's ruining a lot of uh, moments, right?
Oh
And
my gosh, yes.
kids are like, I can't go to the lunchroom. I can't go to cafeteria because everybody in that cafeteria with a phone got that airdrop. And now it's like I can't walk in there. I'm humiliated.
Yep.
And it's like that student's world has just crashed before them. And it's really hard to see that. And it's just like, gosh, when our parents were in school, when we were in school, you know, people got picked on at school, and there were mean kids, and you could go to school. But the thing is, then the difference is that parents knew whatever goes on at school, when my kid comes home, my kid's at home, and we can have a
Yes.
family dinner, and we can talk, and
Yep.
we can do what our family does at home, and my kid is safe at home, and we can close the door. But now your kid could be on the couch and they're in a whole different world. I mean,
Exactly.
literally in a different world. And it never shuts off for kids. It never shuts off. And it's 24/7 and it's constant. And You can be, we used to be able to be picked on at school, but when that 3 o'clock bell rang, we got home and we knew we were safe until 8 o'clock
Yes.
day. But now, kids, that bell rings at 3 o'clock and they go home and they are not safe because that's
It
still
continues.
going
Yeah,
on
it's
and on.
exactly.
And it's just devastating to see that because it's so prevalent. And the only way to get rid of it is to get rid of the phones, but the
I
phones
agree.
are just
It's a two sides of the sword there. There's the
yeah,
good and the bad.
exactly. And I'll go back to the quote. Everybody, you give a kid a playground and there's nobody on duty, there's nobody on recess duty, and bad things can happen on the playground when there's nobody on recess duty. And it's not just physical, it's words, it's predators, it's violence, it's all these things. But when you give a kid a phone, I mean, they have access to everything and
Yep. The whole world at their fingertips.
their whole world. And I had a student this year and her mom took her phone away from her as a consequence of some situation. And I said to her, I said, how do you feel? Like, you haven't had your phone in a month. Like, how do you feel? And she's like, I'm so relieved. She's like, I'm so relieved. I'm less stressed. I'm not worried about what people are saying. She said, I'm more relaxed. I can go to my class and I can focus on my class. And that came as a consequence. She lost her phone, but really what it was so
It
beneficial.
was a gift.
It was
Yeah.
a gift. And if we could just take away our kids' phones, but the problem is that they're addicted and
Yeah.
they
Adults and kids alike. We
adults
all
and
are.
kids are like, and there's a lot of research studies going on about cell phone and internet addiction and things like that. But that kid really, she received a gift out of that from her parents. And I think that's hard for parents to see that as a gift for their kid, because they're like, well, I want my kid to be involved and I want my kid to be liked and I want my kid to be social, and all of those things are good and well, but when they're getting that attention in an unhealthy way and they can never turn it off, that's where it becomes a problem.
Yep.
That becomes a big
100%.
problem. And I think as parents, and I can say this because I am a parent, we need to do a better job, and we need to do a better job of protecting our kids from that. And I think it's possible, but it's hard. And being a parent is hard. And sometimes you have to do really hard things. And as educators, we feel like we are sometimes stuck because the parent wants their kid to have a phone, but the phone's a problem at school.
Yep.
But teachers aren't allowed to take away their phone, because if something happens to the phone, then the teacher is responsible for the phone, and phones
Yep.
are expensive. And like, I feel like, unfortunately, teachers, especially because it's happening in their classrooms, get stuck in such a rock and a hard place. And they can call administrator for support and admin will come in and take the phone, or keep the phone in their office, and things like that. And in certain situations, our principals, they'll keep a phone until a parent comes and picks it up, because they're not giving that kid back their phone because of the situation. And most parents are receptive to that and they understand. And sometimes parents are upset, understandably, but at the same time, we need to protect the whole student body here. And if your child is doing something that's harmful to the whole student body through their cell phone, like, we can't allow your kid access to that phone at school. So it is a double-edged sword sometimes, but I really think there's some legislation in Ohio about cell phones that's happening, and
There's a lot of states that I'm happy
schools.
to see that are stepping up. I think a lot of
Yes,
schools are.
and I think that's good. And the other thing too is, like, in the lunchroom, like, kids are supposed to be talking to each other while they eat lunch, but
Yeah.
their nose is in their phone and they're not talking to each other. So, I have had students come back from COVID, and COVID was 4 years ago now, but still, sometimes some families felt that their child benefited from an online school or from homeschooling during that time, and so they kept them home longer. And that's fine, and for some kids that was a good thing and the right thing for that child. But when you drop them back to 6th grade after they've been home for 4 years,
Oh, yes.
I've had kids literally, like, tell me, like, I literally don't know how to talk to kids my age. Like, I literally
Yep.
don't know
That's
how
a
to
huge one.
sit in a cafeteria and talk to this person across from me. And I've had a student say to me, like, this classroom with 20 kids is too many kids. Like, I can't be in that room. Like, it's just too much. And what's happening is they become some students, and not all students, because some students come out of the, come from homeschool into public school, and they are well adapted and they're fine. But every once in a while, we get that kid, and it's like they literally cannot, they don't know how, because they've lost the skill of interacting with same age
Yes.
peers. And that's really hard for them. And they don't know what to do when they're angry, because they might get angry at home. And when they're angry at home, they might be able to go up to their room and listen to music. But when you're at school, if you get
Not an option.
angry because
Yeah.
someone said something to you, like, you can't go to your room and put on your headphones or AirPods, because it's not an option. We're not at home, and they literally don't know how to, like, navigate that or function in those spaces.
No.
It's sad.
True.
But that's where, the school counselor can really play an instrumental role in helping that child adapt and teach them those skills and be proactive with that kid to help, like, I can't put you I can't change your schedule, and you can't sit in the office every single day all day long to be by yourself. Like, you have to be in these spaces. So, like, let's have a group of 5, and let's sit down and have 5 people come eat lunch in my office, and let's practice interacting and asking other kids questions. And then you do that for a little bit of time, and then they're back in the cafeteria and they're
Yep.
interacting with others. And so it's that skill building and teaching how to do that, how to ask a question, how to raise your hand and get what you need. Like, those are skills that need to be learned. And when you are absent from an environment where you learn those skills, then
Takes a lot longer.
it takes
Yep.
longer. And so, yeah, so it's just an interesting dynamic. But you add that into puberty and hormones and all of those
The
things,
whole long list.
everything in the school, and it's just a lot. So that's my opinion about cell phones. And when my own kid says I need a cell phone in 3rd grade, that will be a hard no. And we'll be the unpopular group of parents who are not giving their children cell phones at age 9.
Yeah, I have family members that refuse. Their kids are going into middle school, and they're like, "You can have a wristwatch. You can have
Right.
where we can make a phone call, and you get like 5 phone numbers, and
Yes.
that's what you can get.
Right.
Like, you can make a phone call, and you can receive a message if you need a message, kind of
Yes.
deal. But it's one of those, like, we're not going to give you all this free reign that's out there. And I think I like that that's an option, that they have that. Hey, it gives you the rich watch, it gives you something. But man, and technology, I wouldn't want to. I'd be afraid to give anybody free reign of technology. I know I shouldn't have been given technology now, and I'm told sometimes of how free reign I could get.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Now, whenever you're doing all this, how in the world do you establish a rapport with a student? Because of getting someone to open up, that is really hard.
Hmm. Yeah, and students can become very vulnerable in a safe space. And before you can even have a safe space, the student needs to know it's a safe space.
Oh yeah.
And relationships are essential. And if you've ever heard of Rita Pearson, she's an educator. She did a phenomenal TED talk. And if you've never heard of Rita Pearson, you should listen to her TED talk. And it's amazing. And she reminds me a
I'm going
lot
to put that link in the bottom below, guys. So if
yeah,
you were looking for it later, if you haven't seen it, there's going to be a link for it.
yeah, that's great, Cade. So, Cade, do you know who Rita Pearson is?
I have seen it. It is
Okay,
awesome.
yeah. So she reminds me a lot of my great grandmother, actually, and I don't know if it's Rita's age or what, but my great grandmother, she was an educator, and she was a teacher and a principal. And back in that day, for a female to be a principal was a pretty big a pretty big thing. But she reminds me of her because my great grandma, and these are things you can't do as much today, but my great grandma, she would say, I had a student that hadn't had a bath in 2 weeks, so I took him in and I gave him a bath. Like, those are things you cannot do in education today, but things that, she would do back in the day when that was okay, where she would keep, crackers in her desk and give them to kids and, things like that. And she's so wise. And,
Oh, yes. Oh,
and
yes.
my great grandmother was so wise. And Rita, she says in her TED talk, and I don't want to give it all away because it's just phenomenal and you've got to watch it. But in
You
there,
do, from beginning to finish.
she talks about the relationship with kids, and she just says bluntly, kids don't learn from people they don't like. And it's just
Yes.
like, hallelujah, like that's so true. That and your goal is not for kids to like you, right? That's not why we're in education, to have a fan group, right?
Oh, yeah.
But the core of that is you got to have relationships with kids before they're going to trust you. And
Yes.
a kid's not going to walk in on the first day of school and tell me their deep, dark secrets. And I would never expect that out of a student or want that for a student. But you got to start, and you got to start from day one, and you've got to build a rapport with kids. And one thing that I do with kids, and I love this, and I call them minute meetings. And it's such a great way to connect and build rapport with students. And I say minute meetings, but it's not literally a minute. It can be 2 or 3 minutes per kid. But during this time, I ask every single student the same 6 or 7 questions. And this is a process, and my colleague and I, we do this every year. And we sit outside a classroom and we talk with the teacher ahead of time so the teacher knows, that this is going to be happening. And we sit outside that classroom at a desk and we're talking with the kids, and we call them out one at a time. And during that time, we ask every kid the same 6 or 7 questions, and we're entering it in a Google form at the same time that we're talking with the kid. And sometimes school counselors will do a needs assessment where the kids fill out a Google form, and those can be effective, and those can be good ways for school counselors to get information from kids about what they need. But
yeah,
in my work, what I've found is that kids want to be face to face with you, and they want to speak, and they want to also hear you. They want to hear
oh,
your
yeah.
voice. So there's a human element that gets missed when you just have kids fill out a Google form. And I'm not knocking Google Forms and needs assessments, because those are very important and you get a lot of really good information from them. But what minute meetings do is it gives you the information from a needs assessment, but it also gives kids face to face time with you, and it gives every kid face to face time with you. And so
Yes.
what I do is my colleague and I, we create the Google form, and it's a little bit different for each grade level because 6th graders have different needs than 8th graders do. And like literally a 6th grader is trying to figure out where the bathroom is. Well, an 8th grader, like they know what bathrooms are. They're trying to figure out, when the tryouts for sports are. So totally different needs, but the same general questions. And during that time, I get a good gauge of where my students are. So, like, for example, and I usually do this in about mid-September or so, when we're about 4 to 5 weeks in, mid-September into October. And ultimately, my goal would be to do this again in January, to do it twice a year. But right now, I'm at once a year, and that's okay. It gives us good information to start the year. But I start broad and open. And I just say, on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel about 6th grade so far? How do you feel about 7th grade?
Nice.
How do you feel about 8th grade? On a scale of 1 to 5. And it gives them a tangible number. Like I can say, I'm at a 4 right now. So far this year is going well. And I always say it, but I also have like a little Likert scale thing with smiley faces, emojis, because some kids are visual and they can like relate
This is true.
face better than a number. So I give them that, and I say, on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel about school so far, your grade level? Okay, on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel about your grade so far? And when I ask them these questions, I get a number for each kid where they're at on those 2 things. And when I'm getting 4s and 5s, and most of my kids are 3s, 4s, and 5s, I'm like, okay, good. I feel like that student's feeling good. They've transitioned well into this school year. But when I have kids that are starting to feel like a two, and we're only in mid-September and they're at a one or a two about, seventh grade so far, I'm like, gosh, this year has been a rough start for this kid.
Yeah.
Maybe they're struggling to get to class. Maybe they're struggling just to like open their locker, figure out the lunchroom. Maybe it's a new student that's just come in this year. When I get students who are on one or two on any of a Likert question, I always follow up with them because I'm like,
Good.
I'll say, when we did our minute meeting, you told me that so far seventh grade's a two. Tell me more about
Ah, yeah.
that. And sometimes I find out things like their schedule is built in a way that they're really struggling to get from their math class to their history class on time. And they are just like tardy all the time and they just can't figure out a good path to get to the next class, or they can't get into a routine, or like they've really been struggling to like wake up in the morning and get to school. Like there's some kind of struggle there, or maybe they don't have any friends in their classes and they need to learn how to make new friends this year. So it can give me a lot of information, like tell me why you're at a two. And sometimes, but when I get to that follow-up point, a student will say, well, on that day I was at a two because I was really struggling to get my locker open up until that point, but now like something just clicked and I got my locker now and now I'm more at like a four. I'm like, okay, good.
Nice.
Like we've made a little bit of progress even though it's only been a week or two. Like I feel good about that, and I feel like, okay, I'm going to keep that kid on my radar because they were at a two at one point this year, but I'm going to kind of watch them, right? But then I also will use a minute meeting to like find out some student needs. Like, do you feel safe at school? Do you feel like, I don't just mean physically safe, but like emotionally safe? Do you feel good in your
Yeah.
classes? Do you feel safe at school? Do you want to be part of a group to help with stress or organization? And I give kids like, I say like, what do you need help with this year? And I give them a list, because if you just say, what do you need help with this year? Kids will say math or
Yeah, they'll
science.
give you a
And
generic. Yeah.
I'm like, those are great, but like, I can't, that's not my role right now. Like, if you, yeah, I'm not your math teacher, but like, let's let your math teacher know you need help. But, but I give them
Let's find a
options.
little more finite. Yeah.
Yeah, I give them some options like stress or anxiety, organization, making new friends. And so I get some of that information from them, and then I can create small groups. So like let's say I got 10 kids that tell me they need help with organization. I can pull those 10 kids together, during a study hall or lunch, and we can work on some organization strategies for like 6 weeks and then, send them back. So those are some really good things that I get from kids. And these are quick. I mean, these are like on a scale of 1 to 5, tell me where you're at. On a scale of 1 to 5, tell me where you're at. Again, on a different topic, or what do you need help with? Like these are like quick questions. And so I say minute meeting, but like I said, it's more like 2 or 3. But then I start big and broad like that, but then I get a little bit more detailed, and I'm not like fishing for information necessarily, but I'm just kind of getting a gauge of where kids are. And so there's 2 questions I ask at the end, and I feel like they're really informational. And those questions are, who's an adult here at school that you trust? And
Yes.
trusted
Oh, it's
adult,
important.
so important, because a lot of kids, they'll say, if you just say who's a trusted adult, a lot of them will say my grandma or my dad, and that's great, and we want adults at home to be trusted. But when a kid's at school and something's going on at school, or they overhear something, we want them to know that they have an adult at school that they can trust to talk to about that.
Yes.
um,
Yes.
and so having a trusted adult is so important, and it goes back to that relationship, right? Because we want to know who our kids are connecting with. And, I feel honored when a kid says, I'm their trusted adult. And
Oh, yeah, that's a huge
that,
honor.
that's great. And that's an honor. And I wish I could be every student's trusted adult, but I know that the reality is that that's not true. So as long as my students have a trusted adult, I'm happy, right? Because I know that if that student trusts their English teacher and they have a problem or they're worried about a friend, they're going to go talk to their English teacher, right? And then
Yeah,
that
exactly.
teacher, if I need to be involved, that teacher will get me. But having that a trusted adult at school is so important and informational. And, in sixth grade, by September, mid-September, October, if they don't have a trusted adult, like that's still okay. We wouldn't expect, every single sixth grader
Yeah,
to
that's hard.
to
That's hard sometimes.
feel attached or trusting to an adult yet. That's okay. But if I have an eighth grader who by September they've been with us in sixth grade and seventh grade, now we're in eighth grade, they can't name a single adult in the whole building that they trust, that's a concern
Yeah.
because they've had a lot of teachers already. They are aware of who the principals are. Sometimes our secretaries in the front office, they're the kid's trusted adult, and it's because, maybe that student is tardy can a lot every day, maybe. And so every single day they are signing in and having some face-to-face connection with the attendance secretary. And for them, that's their trusted adult. And that's great because she's
That's
awesome.
awesome.
And so, but I know that if that student is coming in having a bad day and their trusted adult is the attendance secretary and they're going to be making contact with that person, first thing in the morning, if something's wrong, I can pretty well, believe that they'll say like, hey, I'm just not having a good day, and our principals often get named as trusted adults because they're so visible in the school. And, sometimes
This is amazing to
custodians
have.
or,
Yay.
anybody can be a trusted adult.
Yes, they
And
can.
they can be. And some adults feel like that's a heavy weight to carry to be a trusted adult. But we always tell our staff, if you are a student's trusted adult, number one, that's an honor, but
Yes, it
also
is.
we will support you. So if a student is telling you something that you do not feel equipped to handle, that's okay. We will come help in those situations. And we don't expect you to carry all of the things that the kids are telling you. And sometimes, the trusted adult will hear from a student, my friend hurt themselves last night. And so, but I don't want them to know that I told you, and so that's okay because then that teacher can tell me, hey, I got this information. The student I got it from wants to be confidential, but then I can call down that student that needs checked in on, right?
Yeah.
And it keeps that other friend out of the loop, right? And not named. So it's not always a bad thing that it's not always me. And like I said, I am honored when a student tells me that
Oh,
they're
always.
trusted.
Yeah.
And we often, my colleague and I, we often get named as trusted adults. And I think that's, who we are in our program and the nature of our work and things like that. And we have strong rapport with kids, but just knowing a kid has a trusted adult is huge. And so if a student, is in eighth grade and they're not naming a trusted adult, it's like, okay, we gotta figure out how we need to connect with that student because, the research shows that when kids go to school and they don't have people that they can trust, that they can go down bad rabbit holes, and
Oh, yes,
we
very
need to
quickly.
catch them before that happens. And so that's such an important thing for us. But the last question I always ask kids, and I find this to be one of the most informational questions that I ask, and it's open ended for kids, and I ask every kid, I say, if you could have one wish for your life, what would that be?
Ooh, that is a beautiful question. I love that.
And in middle school they're clever, and some of them might say, oh, I would wish for infinite wishes. And it's like, okay, that's great, but you're not allowed to wish for that. So what would you wish for? And we get the developmentally appropriate responses, right? I wish I could be in the NBA, or I wish that I'll be an NFL player. And we might, you could brush those answers off, but what that really does give you insight to is if that kid wants to be in the NBA, they love basketball. So
They
no
like
matter.
basketball. You have a new conversation piece. Yep.
Exactly. So when I see Joey in the cafeteria, I can say, "Oh yeah, Joey really likes basketball." I can ask him how the basketball game was, right? And so I can use that as a stepping stone for conversations. But sometimes and we get this question a lot too. I wish I could have $1 million. And then sometimes I'll
Yep.
I always do follow up. I'll say, well, what would you do with $1,000,000? And some kids will say, oh, I would go shopping and I would buy new Jordans and things like that. And all that's great because that gives you perspective of where that kid is, right? And so that's great. And those are all developmentally appropriate responses, and they're great. But sometimes, and this is where the extra information comes, and I don't prompt for it. I just ask and kids share what they're comfortable sharing. But as the minute meeting goes on, we've built rapport already, right? So we've talked about
Yeah.
how things are going and who they're trusted. We've talked about some things. And so sometimes when I follow up and I say, if you got $1,000,000, what would you do with that $1,000,000? And sometimes kids will say, if I had $1,000,000, I'd help my mom pay the bills. Or if
Yes.
I had $1,000,000, I'd help my dad buy a house so we didn't have to live in this apartment. Or if I had $1,000,000, I would buy shoes that would fit me. And it's like, wow, thanks for sharing that with me. Like, that's deep and that's heavy. And that gives me information like that family might need some extra support. And I
Yep.
can go back and I can look like, do I need to touch base with them about like getting a free or reduced lunch form filled out? Or does this family maybe need food bags home on the weekend? Or do I need to make sure that they're on my list to get information about holiday assistance? Like, it just puts some of those needs on my radar. And so that's all super good information. And then sometimes I'll get a kid and they'll share some other stuff with me. I'll say like, if you could have one wish in your life, what would that be? And they might tell me things like, I wish my grandma didn't have cancer, or I wish my dog didn't die last week, or I just wish people would stop being mean to me, or I wish my parents weren't divorced. And like, that's just deep stuff that kids share. And I'm not digging for that, but that in the moment, that student feels safe enough to share that with me. And it gives me insight into their reality of what's going on for that student. And so I can follow up with those kids then, later and say, how's your grandma doing? Or who are these kids that are being so mean to you? Like, what can we do to help
Oh,
you?
yeah.
Because they might not have told anybody that
This is
somebody was
true.
mean to them. But then in that moment, they feel safe enough to say, like, so and so has just been so mean to me and I wish it would stop. And for them, that's like really impacting their life. And so those are things that like I can step in and help them with that. And, if a parent says, or if a student says, I wish my parents weren't divorced, I say, okay, wow, that gives me insight. Okay, they're going to two houses. Sometimes things might
Yep.
be left at mom or dad's, or, those kinds of things. And it just is so informational. And back to that rapport building, every single student has that same opportunity to have a one on one conversation with their school counselor. And like I said earlier, every student deserves a school counselor. And when
Yes.
counselor ratios are at 700 kids, for them to be able to have a minute meeting with every single student, that's hard. And my ratio is above 250. It's more in the 300 range, but it's manageable enough that I know I can meet with all of those kids in that minute meeting. And so during minute meetings, during that time is blocked off on our calendar because we know it's critical that we get those
Yes,
done
it is.
and that we get
Yeah.
them done in a timely fashion. And there could, if it's a class of 30 and a class period's only 48 minutes, I mean, we sometimes take two class periods to get through a whole class because kids share stuff. and
Yeah, I do. Yep.
and it's just important to give them time and space to be able to do that. So that is huge. But then once I can have that conversation with kids, then I know their name. I could put a name with a face, and then I know something about them. And then when I see them in other spaces, I can bring that up with them and continue to build that rapport, because when you listen to the little things, kids will tell you the big things.
That is
And
very true.
and that's true as educators and counselors, but it's also true as a parent. You got to listen to the little things so that they will tell you the big things.
Right there is where we're going to take a pause in the conversation. I feel like this is a good point in order to end episode 2 before we go to episode 3 coming up in 2 weeks. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation that I've had with Amy about her being a middle school counselor and starting to get some good information that you can be able to use to help provide for your niece, your nephew, your son, your daughter, your grandchild, anyone that can be able to benefit from having their school counselor inside of the building that they go to school at. So if you would like to be able to, in the meantime, reach out to me. My name is Cade Curtis, which is spelled CadeCurtis. I have an email at Cade, which is spelled CADE, at learningfromfriends.com. I have a Twitter page. I have a Facebook page. I have an Instagram page, all under Learning from Friends. I also have, if you would like to donate, a Patreon page that you can be able to go on and donate at the level that you feel most comfortable with. And I would deeply appreciate that for year 2025. That's make this thing a great year so far. And with that, thank you so much for sticking with me for these 3 years now that we're going into. And it's a wonderful new year. Started out strong and continue to come back and listen to more. So my name is Cade Curtis, your tour guide in this lovely adventure that I like to call Learning from Friends. And most of all, don't forget to let your curiosity fly high.